hired a plumber while my son was out of town. About 40 minutes after he arrived, my phone rang. It was him, and he was whispering, "Sir, I don't want to worry you, but is there supposed to be anyone staying in the house right now?" I told him no. My son was in Denver for a conference, wouldn't be back until Sunday. There was a pause, long enough that I thought the call had dropped. "Sir," he said, real quiet. "I can hear someone moving around upstairs, and there's food on the counter. Looks fresh." I was standing in my own kitchen when he said that. 63 years old, retired, 2 cups of coffee into a Tuesday morning, and suddenly the floor felt like it had shifted underneath me. "Don't go upstairs," I told him. "Stay where you are. I'm on my way. My name is Arthur. I'm 63, widowed 7 years now, and I live alone in the house my late wife Beverly and I bought in 1989. It's a colonial in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. The kind of street where people still wave from their driveways. And the biggest drama is usually whose dog got into whose garden. My son Liam is 34. He moved back in with me 3 years ago after his divorce, which I understood. He was hurting. I was lonely. It seemed like the right thing for both of us. For a while it was good. We'd have dinner together most nights. He'd help with the yard. I'd get used to hearing footsteps in the house again, hearing another person breathe in the rooms Beverly used to fill. But then things changed, slowly, the way things usually change. So gradually, you don't notice until you're already deep inside something you don't recognize. Liam had a girlfriend. Her name was Sandra. I didn't like her from the first time he brought her home. That sounds harsh, and I'm not proud of saying it, but it's the truth. There was something careful about her, measured. The way she smiled at me was the same way a salesperson smiles. Full face, no eyes. She moved in around the time of my birthday. Liam mentioned it casually over dinner one evening. The way you'd mention a change in the weather. "Oh, by the way, Sandra's going to stay here for a bit. Just until she gets settled." I asked what settled meant. He said he wasn't sure. I let it go because he was my son and I didn't want to be the kind of father who made things harder. That was my first mistake. She'd been living there about 8 months when my other son, Kevin, stopped coming around. Kevin is 2 years younger than Liam. He lives about 20 minutes away in Guyana with his wife and their 2 kids. For most of his life, he was the one who called on Sundays, showed up for holidays without being asked, texted me pictures of my grandchildren doing ordinary things. Grace drawing on the sidewalk with chalk, little Ben asleep in the car seat. Then the calls slowed down. Then they stopped. I asked Liam about it once. He said Kevin was just busy. New job, 2 kids, you know how it is. I knew how it was. But I also knew Kevin. And Kevin didn't go quiet unless something made him. The water heater in the basement had been making a sound for about 2 weeks. A low, metallic groaning whenever it kicked on. Liam was supposed to call someone before he left for Denver, but he forgot, or said he forgot, and so I made the appointment myself. The plumber's name was Roy. He came highly recommended by my neighbor across the street, a retired teacher named June who'd used him for years. Roy arrived at 8:30 on a Tuesday. I let him in, showed him to the basement door, made another cup of coffee, and went to sit at the kitchen table with the newspaper. Old habits. 40 minutes later, my phone rang. "I've already told you," what he said. "What I haven't told you is what I was thinking on the drive over. I'd been living in a rental about 15 minutes away for the past 3 months. That's the part I left out. Liam and I had argued. A real argument, the kind that leaves marks. And I'd moved out of my own house. Temporarily, I told myself, while things settled down. The argument was about Kevin. Kevin had come to me in February, 6 months before Liam's Denver trip. He sat across from me at my kitchen table, my rental's kitchen table, which was smaller and faced the wrong direction, and he told me something that I didn't want to hear. He said that Sandra had been telling Liam things about Kevin that weren't true, that she'd been slowly, carefully constructing a version of Kevin that made him look selfish, unstable, jealous of Liam's position in my life. Kevin showed me text messages, things Liam had sent him that didn't sound like Liam at all, full of resentment, accusations about money I'd supposedly given Kevin that I'd never given anyone. Accusations about things Kevin had supposedly said about me behind my back. None of it was true. I knew that, but I also hadn't said so clearly enough when it mattered, and by the time Kevin put it all in front of me, the damage had been done. When I confronted Liam, he defended Sandra completely. Said Kevin was manipulating me. Said I was too old to see it. That word, too old. That's the one that's still in me like a splinter. Not because it was cruel, though it was, but because it worked. For a few days after, I actually wondered if he was right. I moved out a week later. Liam didn't ask me to stay, so when Roy called me that Tuesday morning and said someone was in my house, the one I was no longer living in, I wasn't just a concerned homeowner. I was a father who had been wondering for 3 months what was actually happening under his own roof. I called Kevin from the car, told him briefly. He said he'd meet me there. I also called the non-emergency police line. I know that might surprise some people, but I'm 63 years old, and I've watched enough people make the mistake of going in without backup. I wasn't going to let pride make me stupid. A patrol officer arrived right around the same time I did. Kevin pulled up 2 minutes later. Roy was waiting on the front porch. He's a stocky man in his 50s, calm in the way that people who work with their hands often are. He told us he'd heard movement in the upstairs hallway around 9:15, and when he went to the bottom of the stairs and called out, the movement stopped. He found a plate on the kitchen counter with toast on it, half-eaten, still slightly warm, a coffee mug with coffee still in it. Liam was supposed to be in Denver. The officer went in first. Kevin and I waited on the porch with Roy. I could hear my own heart. About 3 minutes later, the officer came back to the door. "Sir," he said, "there's a young woman upstairs. She says she lives here." Her name was Priscilla. She was 26 years old. She was sitting on the edge of the bed in the guest room. The room that had been my daughter-in-law's guest room before the divorce. The room that nobody was supposed to be using. And she was crying quietly, not hysterically. The way someone cries when they've been holding it in for a long time. She wasn't a stranger. She was Sandra's younger sister. She told us, in pieces over the course of about an hour, that she had been living in my house for 4 months. Not hidden, not locked away. She had a key, she had the guest room, she apparently had the run of the place. Liam knew. Sandra had arranged it. They told Priscilla that I was fine with it, that I'd approved it, that it was a temporary arrangement while she got back on her feet after losing her apartment in Cincinnati. I had never been asked. I had never approved anything, but that wasn't the part that hit me hardest. The part that hit me hardest was when Priscilla looked up at me from that bed and said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know you didn't know. Sandra told me you and Liam had worked it all out." And then she said, "She does that. She tells people what they need to hear. She told your other son things too, things that weren't true. She showed me the text she sent Liam pretending to be." She stopped herself, looked at Kevin. "I think you should probably talk to your brother." I called Liam. He answered on the 3rd ring, still in Denver, sounding relaxed. I told him what had happened. There was a silence that told me more than anything he said after. He tried, at first, to manage it. Said Priscilla had misunderstood. Said he meant to tell me. Said it wasn't a big deal. I listened to all of it without saying anything, which I've learned over 63 years is sometimes the most effective response. When a person is making excuses, they'll eventually run out of road if you don't hand them any. He ran out of road. "I should have told you," he said finally. "I should have asked." "Yes," I said. "I didn't think you'd say yes." "Then you should have asked and found out," I said. He came home 2 days early. What came out over the following weeks was, in some ways, worse than a single dramatic betrayal. It was a pattern. Small, sustained, deliberate. Sandra had been managing Liam's relationship with Kevin for over a year. The texts Kevin had shown me, some of them had been drafted by her, sent from Liam's phone while he was asleep or in the shower. The accusations about money, about things Kevin had said, fabricated. She'd shown Liam manufactured screenshots, edited conversations, a version of his brother designed to push him away. Why? Kevin's wife, her name is Annette, had seen through Sandra almost immediately and hadn't been quiet about it. In Sandra's world, that made Annette, and by extension Kevin, a threat to be neutralized. As for Priscilla, she genuinely hadn't known the full picture. She knew her sister was controlling, knew she bent the truth, but she hadn't known about the texts, hadn't known about Kevin. When everything came out, she sat in my living room and cried in a way that made it very clear she was grieving something she probably suspected for years about who her sister actually was. I didn't have a lot of sympathy to spare at that moment, but I had some. The hardest conversation wasn't with Liam. The hardest conversation was with Kevin. I drove to his house in Gahanna on a Thursday evening. Annette opened the door, and the look on her face, not triumphant, not cold, just very tired, told me she'd been waiting for this for a long time. She brought out coffee and then quietly took the kids upstairs. Kevin sat across from me at his kitchen table, and I told him I was sorry, that I had believed the wrong person, or more precisely, that I had not believed him strongly enough when he brought me the truth, that I had let the word old shake me when I should have been shaken by something else entirely. He didn't say, "I told you so." He's not that kind of man. He said, "I just want to be your son again, Dad." I had to look away for a moment. Out the window at the dark yard, I said, "You never stopped." Liam asked Sandra to leave. It didn't happen all at once. There were conversations I wasn't part of. A week of tension I only know about secondhand, through things Liam told me later. She didn't go quietly. She argued, she accused, she cycled through several versions of events that painted herself as the victim of a family that had ganged up on her. Liam listened to all of it, and then he asked her to leave again. He told me afterward that the thing that finally cracked it open wasn't the texts or the screenshots or even Priscilla's account. It was something smaller. He'd found, on his own phone, in a folder he'd never created, photographs of documents, financial documents, account statements, the deed to the house, a copy of my will that he'd seen once and forgotten about, a copy of Beverly's death certificate. He didn't know how they got there. Sandra had access to his phone. He'd never questioned it before. He brought them to me. We sat together at my kitchen table, my real kitchen table, in my own house, where I had moved back in after Roy's phone call turned everything sideways, and we went through them together. I'm not a suspicious man by nature, but looking at those documents arranged in a folder on my son's phone, I felt something I can only describe as the ground becoming firm again after months of walking on ice. Someone had been doing research, long-term, methodical research, into my house, my finances, my family structure. I hired a lawyer. I won't detail everything that followed because some of it is still unresolved, and my lawyer has asked me to be careful. What I will tell you is this. There was nothing criminal enough to prosecute easily, but there was enough to matter, enough to make certain conversations necessary, enough to ensure that Sandra understood clearly that we were not people she could afford to come back around. She didn't contest leaving. She took what was hers. And, we discovered later, one or two things that weren't, though nothing worth the grief of pursuing. She was gone within 2 weeks. Priscilla moved into a studio apartment in Columbus. She texts me occasionally. Last month she sent a photograph of a small succulent she'd bought for her windowsill with a note that said, "First thing I've ever kept alive in a new place. Thought you'd appreciate it." I didn't quite know what to make of that except that it made me feel like something was growing back. Liam still lives with me. We're figuring it out. That's an incomplete sentence, and I mean it to be. We eat dinner together most nights again. We argue about the thermostat. He does the yard on weekends. Some evenings he'll bring up something that happened, a small moment where he can see now what he couldn't see then. And we talk about it the way you'd discuss a road you'd both been driving down and only one of you had seen the ice patch coming. I don't think he's a bad person. I've thought about it enough to be sure of that. I think he was lonely, and someone very skilled at reading loneliness found him at the right moment and made herself indispensable before he knew what was happening. I think he loved her genuinely, and she used that. I think he was ashamed after, in the way that makes it hard to look your father in the eye. He looks me in the eye now. That's something. I think about Roy sometimes. The plumber. He came to fix a water heater, and instead he made a phone call that changed everything. I sent him a card, thanked him. He called me when he got it, a little embarrassed, said he was just doing what anyone would do. I told him not everyone would. He said, "Well, you seem like a decent man, sir." Seemed worth the awkward call. I've been turning that over for months. Seem like a decent man. I hope I am. I know I've made mistakes, let things go too long, moved out when I should have stood my ground, let silence say the things I should have said out loud. Beverly used to tell me I held things too close, said I thought keeping quiet was the same as keeping the peace, and it wasn't. She was right. She usually was. Kevin brings the grandchildren over on Sundays now. Grace is 7, and Ben just turned 5. They run through the house like they own it, which I like. The house has needed that kind of noise for a long time. Last Sunday, Ben found an old photograph on the bookshelf. Beverly and me at the Columbus Zoo, sometime in the late 90s, squinting into the summer sun. He held it up to me very seriously and asked, "Is that you when you were little?" Liam laughed from the kitchen. Kevin laughed from the couch. I told Ben that yes, that was me when I was little. He studied the photograph for another moment and then set it back on the shelf with the kind of careful respect that 5-year-olds occasionally produce out of nowhere, and went back to his toys. I sat with that for the rest of the afternoon. The house is mine again. My family is in it. That's everything. I've been thinking a lot lately about how things unravel. Not the dramatic moments. Not the phone call from Roy. Not the officer at the door. Not the folder of documents on Liam's phone. Those were just the places where what had already happened finally became visible. The unraveling had started much earlier, in small, quiet moments where I told myself it wasn't worth saying something. Where I held my tongue because I didn't want to be the difficult one. That's the thing about keeping the peace. It feels like wisdom when you're doing it. It feels like patience, like maturity, like you're the bigger person in the room. But there's a version of silence that isn't patience at all. It's just fear wearing a calmer face. Fear of conflict. Fear of being wrong. Fear of what you might find if you start asking the questions that are already forming in the back of your mind. I was afraid. I won't dress it up. When Sandra moved in and Kevin started going quiet, I felt the shift, but I didn't name it. And when I don't name something I've learned, I give it room to grow in the dark. That's on me. Not on Liam, not on her. On me, for choosing comfort over clarity for too long. What I've come to believe, not because anyone told me, but because I've lived 63 years and watched enough things play out, is that the choices we make in small moments compound. They accumulate. A man who dismisses his instincts once finds it easier to dismiss them a second time. A man who lets a half-truth pass without question builds a house on ground that's already shifting. I did that, and the house nearly came down. But here's what I also believe. It's never too late to course correct, as long as you're honest about where you went wrong. Not brutal, not punishing, just honest. Kevin didn't need an explanation from me. He needed me to sit across from him and say, clearly, that I had failed him, and I knew it. Liam didn't need a lecture about Sandra. He needed time and space to see what I had already seen, and when he finally saw it, to know I was still his father on the other side of that. Intelligence. Real intelligence. Not the kind that scores well on tests, but the kind that actually serves you in a life, is mostly just the willingness to keep looking at a situation honestly, even when what you see is uncomfortable, even when what you see is your own reflection doing something you're not proud of. I had that willingness. I just took it out too late. The courage part isn't the dramatic moment. It's the ordinary Tuesday where you finally make the call, have the conversation, hire the lawyer, drive to your son's house in Guyana on a Thursday evening and sit down and say the words. Courage in real life is mostly just deciding that the discomfort of acting is better than the cost of continuing not to. Roy called because he noticed something and trusted his instinct enough to act on it. He said he thought I seemed like a decent man. I'm still working on deserving that.